talking about getting stuck and then ideally, hopefully, getting unstuck, particularly in the context of people working on big challenges in design with computers. So let me begin by sort of elaborating on the context. We are surrounded by computers and computation, but most of our engagement with computation is as consumers, pointing, clicking, browsing, dragging, and less as creators, designing, making, producing. When I talk to a lot of kids about what they're doing with computers, they're watching videos on YouTube, they're playing all sorts of video games, they're interacting with other people on social networking platforms. But there's so much more you can do with computers. Computation is an incredibly powerful medium for self-expression and problem solving. And so for the past 7 years, my research activities have been focused on working with teachers to think about computational literacy in the classroom using a tool, a programming language developed by our colleagues down the street at MIT called Scratch. This is what Scratch looks like, and you build up your own interactive media by snapping instructions together, just as you might build something in the physical world by snapping Lego bricks together. And you can create all sorts of projects, games, stories, animations, simulations. You can create a digital piano, an air traffic control simulation, an interactive book report about Beowulf, your very own graphing calculator. I've been working with a wide range of teachers, K to 12, college and beyond, across curricular areas, teachers who know a lot about computers and computer science, teachers who know a little about computers and computer science, teachers who are completely terrified of computers. So to support all of these teachers, I built an online community called Scratch Ed. Scratch Ed was launched in 2009, and there are more than 14,000 members, and we have about 120,000 page views each month. Teachers can share stories, exchange resources, find each other, ask and answer questions, and I've learned a lot about teachers' concerns about working with Scratch through Scratch Ed. Probably the biggest concern I hear from teachers is that they're going to have students work on big, open-ended projects, and the student is going to run into an intractable problem. And the student is going to be freaked out, and the teacher is going to be freaked out, and they're not going to know how to solve the problem. So again and again, I hear from teachers, I'm afraid of getting stuck. What if I can't help this young learner? What if we can't figure out what to do? And it's just this panic moment. Fair enough. That sounds a little scary. Starting with this blank canvas is a bit intimidating. How do you go from this to building something that you really care about and that you love? The authoring environment is accompanied by an online community where hundreds of thousands of kids in school and out of school have created and shared millions of projects. And so I wondered, how do kids out of school who don't have the benefit of supported teachers, how do they make sense of Scratch? So for several years, I studied and interviewed kids who were participating with Scratch in the online community, and there tended to be 3 clusters of kids. One group of kids, they encountered Scratch, they didn't really know what it was, they didn't know how to make sense of it, they didn't have any support, so they weren't that interested in it. They had the meh reaction. The second group of kids, they got it. They were super excited about it, they knew exactly what to do, they had a supportive environment, they're fine, they figured it out. A third group of kids, they didn't really know what they could do with it. They didn't really have any support, but they really wanted to figure it out. And so I spent a lot of time focused on this group and asked them, well, how do you get unstuck? What advice do you have for teachers who are afraid of getting stuck? So I thought I'd share with you kids' top 5 strategies for getting unstuck. Strategy number 1, read through your code. Now, this probably sounds really obvious, right? If you build something and it doesn't work, you should go back to the thing that you built and see what the problem is. But a surprising number of kids, if their projects didn't work, they would just throw them out. Over time, kids realized that maybe wasn't the best strategy and that they should invest some time sort of being critical and analytical about the artifacts they had created. Strategy number 2, experiment with your code. If you can't find what the problem is, well, one student compared it to the tile-based word game Bananagrams. Take blocks out, put blocks in, tinker with it, play with it. Strategy number 3, look for examples. In the online community, you have access to more than 6.3 million projects, sort of endless source of inspiration. Say you want to build a side-scrolling game. Well, find an example, find another example, look at the implementations, and build something new. Strategy number 4, work with someone else. From collaborations to consultations, kids spoke extensively about the power of working with others, being able to build more together than you can apart. Strategy number 5 is my favorite, be persistent. All of the kids talked about the enormous challenge, but great satisfaction that comes with programming. The challenge requires a lot of persistence, but they noted you also need to know when to take a break. As 11-year-old Jensen noted, sometimes I get myself so dug in a hole that I have to just get out of scratch for the day, because after a lot of programming, your head hurts. It's not easy to program with a hurting head. So let's get back to the teachers. What can we learn from these kids out of school? Well, very pragmatically, the kids' strategies are strategies that teachers can use to get unstuck from tricky programming problems. But I actually think there's a more powerful lesson, and this is what I tell teachers. The students don't need you in the way you think they need you. They don't need you to know everything, to have every solution. So I don't think the problem is that we're getting stuck on tricky programming problems. I think the problem is that we're kind of getting stuck in outdated visions of teaching and learning. You know, the teacher who knows everything, the sage on the stage. We need to let that go. We need to embrace the vulnerability of not knowing. So I wanted to share a passage from one of my favorite books that talks about this power of vulnerability in not knowing. It's by Seymour Papert, and he's describing an exchange he observed between a teacher and a young learner working on a problem together. As they puzzled together, the child had a revelation. "Do you mean," he said, "that you really don't know how to fix it?" The child did not yet know how to say it, but what had been revealed to him was that he and the teacher had been engaged together in a research project. The incident is poignant. It speaks of all the times this child entered into teachers' games of, let's do that together, all the while knowing that the collaboration was a fiction. Discovery cannot be a setup. Invention cannot be scheduled. Magic happens when kids are given opportunities to define and pursue and struggle with big problems, when they learn from you, when they learn from each other, and when you learn from them. And that's what I think about when I think about getting unstuck. Thank you.